unboxing of the David Bowie Conversation Piece box set. The outer white slipcase is very uneventful. It just has the title and literally nothing else on it. The spine says the title. Inside we have the book, which also contains the discs, and we have a picture from Haddon Hall with the varsity print circle idea from the front cover on it. Back cover is blank. Inside here is the sheet that was originally on the back with the track list. We have the first two CDs at the front. The first one is the home demos. The second one is the Mercury demos. The theme with the CD wallets here is just there's a square of those circles and it gets wider on each disc. There's the title, and then inside the book we have some quotations from David Bowie. We have notes, track by track notes on all of the demos included on CD 1 and 2. We have disc labels, tape box covers, lots of photos of him from the period, some press correspondence with his manager Kenneth Pitt, pictures of acetate discs, etc., etc. Some posters from his arts lab promoting the band, the Feathers band, that is. Contact sheets. I do like that the text is very large. Makes it a lot easier to read than the books in the 5 Years box set. Towards the back we've got news clippings, including some interviews with David. We have the original artwork by George Underwood. Advertisements. Essay about the album and some of the other tracks, and then notes from Tony Visconti about the remix, and then the credits. We have the final 3 discs at the back. We have conversation pieces, hodgepodge disc, BBC sessions, and single material. We have the 69 stereo mixes and the 2019 mixes, and what they've done here is they've just inverted the square for those little dots, and that's basically it. Very simple, to the point, straightforward box set. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. I'm Brandon Ware. You're watching Angel65, my channel for all things music related, music posts, as well as music reviews. And today is the first music review in quite some time, well over a month. We're going to talk about David Bowie Conversation Piece box set. Some context as to why I've been away for so long. Work has just been insanely busy. I've been on a David Bowie kick for a while and was listening to the Era sets and decided to get some of this other stuff that's been released in the last few years. I had some trouble with this box set. The first copy I bought, 4 of the 5 CDs didn't work correctly in my player. At first I thought that was down to the player, but it's not an issue I've had with any other disc. And so I sent it back and got a replacement copy. And after going through it piece by piece for a while, I actually just went through all of the CDs again today, as well as the book, and decided I wanted to talk about it. So some context for this box set. This covers the period between 68 and 69, so post David Bowie's first album for the Duram label, while he's waiting for another record deal. This covers his development with the Turquoise Trio, which eventually morphed into Feathers, and then eventually his first album for Philips and Mercury, his second album overall, which is also self-titled, called David Bowie. So there's 5 CDs in here in addition to the book. The first CD is all home demos. And this is very interesting because the first 12 or so of these are just solo demos. Some of them are overdubbed and some of them are just a single performance of acoustic guitar and vocal. It's interesting to hear these songs in this context. I mean, some of the songs ended up on the album. Many of them did not, and are songs that I had certainly never heard before. I guess a lot of this stuff has been around for quite a while. It's been available on various bootlegs and whatnot over the years, but I'm not a Bowie completionist per se, so a lot of this stuff was certainly new to me. I know some of the hang-ups around this box set from what I read from other reviewers online is that most of this stuff is previously available, but to have it all in one place was interesting for me. I had to think about whether I really wanted to buy this or not, because the first David Bowie album was never a favorite of mine, though I will say I think I've become much closer to it after spending some time with this box set and just listening to the development of some of the songs on it. So in terms of these demos, you get April's Tooth of Gold, Reverend Raymond Brown, When I'm 5, Mother Gray, In the Heat of the Morning, Goodbye Threepenny Joe, Love All Around, London by Tata. I guess there's official recordings of that, but I had not heard that song before this box set. 2 versions of a song called Angel, Angel, Grubby Face, a little tune called Animal Farm, which is interesting, and then we get 4 different demo versions of Space Oddity with lyric variations, etc. This was fascinating because it really shows his use of the stylophone more than the final studio recording that is well known. 3 of these versions are with John Hutchinson, who replaced Tony Hill in the Feathers trio, and after his girlfriend Hermione left, it became just a duo, so a bulk of the demos on this release are with the 2 of them. Very interesting pairing that. It was almost very Simon and Garfunkel folk duo, and I really liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. So in addition to those versions of Space Oddity, you get Lover to the Dawn, Ching-a-Ling, An Occasional Dream, Let Me Sleep Beside You, and a really pretty cover song called Life is a Circus. Following that, there's 3 more solo demos. 2, there's Conversation Piece and Jerusalem, and then a final demo for George Underwood, who was the designer of the album cover, called Hole in the Ground. Not all of these songs are amazing or super interesting, but to just hear them in solo demo form is very fascinating, and honestly they sound pretty decent. There's some distortion and whatnot, but overall the sound quality is very acceptable. It's not good sound quality, but it's far from the worst thing I've ever heard, especially given I just did an entire series on those King Crimson box sets where some of those live releases, the sound quality is almost unbearable to the point of you wonder why they would even put this out, but overall the sound quality here is very acceptable, as it is on disc 2, which is the Mercury demos. So I guess this is a demo tape, again with Hutchinson, that was created and sent to Bob Reno at Mercury Records prior to him signing with them, and it contains some of the same songs as well as a couple different ones that aren't on the first disc. We get Space Oddity, Janine, An Occasional Dream, Conversation Piece, Ching-a-Ling, Letter to Hermione, Lover to the Dawn, Love Song, When I'm 5, Life is a Circus. The most interesting ones are probably, again, the Space Oddity. Ching-a-Ling is a very interesting song that I was not familiar with. Lover to the Dawn is interesting because it morphed into Signet Committee on the final album. And Life is a Circus, again, I actually really dig that song. It would have been interesting had he done a full studio version of it on the final album, but he decided to stick to all original material, which was probably a wise choice. The most interesting thing about the Mercury demos is probably the chatter in between as he's talking to Bob Reno through just narrating what they're doing on this tape machine. Very interesting. I liked that. That was a very pleasant listen, almost like a little solo acoustic concert set. The book suggests it's basically what him and Hutch would have sounded like live at that point, so I suppose that's the closest someone like me would ever get to hearing that. Disc 3 is called Conversation Pieces, and this is just kind of a hodgepodge, not unlike the Recall compilations that are in the Eras box sets that Parlophone released. So it starts with In the Heat of the Morning, a Decca recording that was slated for a single but never ended up getting released. London by Tata, an alternative take, because I guess the master take is missing. We get a Top Gear radio session with the Tony Visconti Orchestra. This has In the Heat of the Morning, London by Tata, Karma Man, When I'm 5, and Silly Boy Blue. The first I had ever heard Karma Man was on the Toy album, actually, in the Brilliant Adventure box set. I had not heard any of the original versions of that. And I'll be upfront right now, I've never heard his Duram album. I've never gone and sought that out. Let me know in the comments if I should. But the Top Gear session is good. I tend to be a big fan of these BBC radio sessions from any band that I can find them from. The Beatles BBC sessions were really cool. The Led Zeppelin BBC sessions were really cool. On the Pink Floyd early years box set, the BBC stuff on that is extremely cool. There's some really cool BBC stuff on that. In terms of this, I mean, they sound very well done. Certainly better sound quality than the demos. And then we get a little chunk of just random miscellaneous tracks, Ching-a-ling, so I guess this is the version that Feathers recorded, so this has Hermione on it. The Morgan Studios version of Space Oddity, which was never released. This is an alternate take, because I guess, again, the master take is missing. This sounds more just like a studio demo to me. It really does not sound that much like the finished song. That does make it interesting. And then we get some of the single stuff that's been around forever. All of this is on the first of the era's box sets, 5 years. Space Oddity, the single edit. Wild Eyed Boy from Free Cloud, the single version with Paul Buckmaster on Arco bass. Janine, the mono mix, which I don't remember which single that was a B-side of or whatever. And then Conversation Piece, which is again a B-side, for which the box set is named after. Really cool song. I've always thought that was a neat song, and I really like the redone version on the Toy album as well. And then the disc closes with another BBC session for the Dave Lee Travis Show. This one's more electric. We get Let Me Sleep Beside You, Unwashed and Somewhat Slightly Dazed, and Janine. Not as cool as the first BBC session, not as enlightening anyway. The third disc is probably it's simultaneously the most interesting and the least interesting, because some of this stuff has been around before and I've already heard it. It doesn't have as much of a theme as the other 4 CDs in the box set. It's just kind of a hodgepodge, as I've said, but it does have some cool stuff on it, and the Decca tracks that start the disc were interesting to me, especially London by Tata. What a strange song that is, and I had never heard that before. I know Bowie fanatics that are dedicated fans, I'm sure that they're as familiar with it as anything else from this period, but I had not heard it before I bought this. And then discs 4 and 5 are basically dedicated to the album. So disc 4 is the original mix. Now this is the 2009 remaster, not the 2015 remaster that's in the 5 years box set. I guess because for that remaster they didn't remain very faithful to the original LP EQing, whereas this is more similar to it. I suppose it sounded better. I didn't really A-B them. But again, as I said, this was never an album I was super fascinated by. And so Visconti said himself it was never an album that sounded that great. It wasn't recorded as well as stuff that was to come. And not as much time was spent on that original mix. But it sounds fine. And then we get extra tracks, so we get a stereo mix of the single version of Wild Eyed Boy from Free Cloud. And then we get 3 unreleased early mixes of Letter to Hermione, Janine, and An Occasional Dream, so I guess all the songs that are about women on the album. And then we get the Ragazza Sola, the Italian version of Space Oddity, with lyrics that have absolutely nothing to do with the original lyrics, which is interesting. That's never been that interesting of a track to me. I mean, it's interesting to hear Bowie sing in Italian, but obviously I would prefer the English version. And then disc 5 is the 2019 remix, which they called the Space Oddity album, and it has an additional track. It has Conversation Piece, which was initially supposed to be on the album, but was removed due to time constraints. In the notes in the box set, Visconti says that vinyl can be mastered louder now because it's assisted by computer, although I haven't heard this. I know it's available on vinyl, so I don't know if it sounds good or bad, but The album does sound more complete with that track in there, I will say. I do like having that as part of the track order. And then we have 2 extra tracks, which is a new remix of the single version of Wild Eyed Boy from Free Cloud and a new remix of the Italian Space Oddity. So that is everything that's contained on this set. Um, Overall, I was very impressed with it. I thought it was really cool. This is not necessarily my favorite period in Bowie history, but as I said earlier, I feel much closer to this album after hearing it. I actually appreciate it a lot more now. Some of the tracks that I kind of maybe didn't think of as being particularly brilliant, I enjoy more now. I always loved Space Oddity. That's a incredible song. I've always loved it. I've always thought it was amazing. Some of the other tracks on the album, in fact, most of them, whenever I would listen to this in the context of 5 years or whatever, I would always think, well, this is just the first one, and it's kind of a placeholder till we get to the more interesting stuff, starting with The Man Who Sold the World. But I have a lot more respect for this album now. Some of the tracks that really stand out to me, the ones that I really like, I've become much closer to Signet Committee. I really like that track. The last 4 minutes of it is very repetitive, but lyrically, I think it's fantastic. I really love Bowie just slashing those hippies, man, because as I've said in a couple other videos, that hippie crap from the late 60s, I think it is just irritating. I hate reading about it. I hate people glorifying it. I thought it was just a hedonic, bad moment in American and English culture. And so to hear him talk about the hypocrisy of that movement, I enjoy the lyrics to that song a lot. And I really like Wild Eyed Boy from Free Cloud as well. Both versions. I think the version with Arco bass is cool. Obviously, I still like the fully orchestrated version a lot better. Conversation Piece, again, always thought that was a cool song with really good lyrics and a beautiful melody. God Knows I'm Good is a cool track. I think the chord change at the very end of it, the very end of each chorus, it's just so interesting. I remember the very first time I heard that song, as I'm listening to it, and it gets to the chorus, and it's God knows I'm good. God may look the other way today. And when it got to that chord change right there, I was like, that was weird. I was not expecting that at all. There's a very weird chord to come in at that moment, but makes it an interesting piece of music. Memory of a Free Festival's okay. I think I prefer the single version to the album version. And what else? Occasional Dream is cool. Those are probably the ones that I like the most. But of all of them, of course, my favorite is still Space Oddity. I think it's a wonderful song, and I think it's very funny that Tony Visconti said he didn't like it, and that's why Gus Dudgeon was given that one, and he did the rest of the album. But I've always thought it was phenomenal. I do think it's the standout track on the album, and one of the most interesting songs that he ever did. But I have a lot more respect for the rest of the album. As for the remix, after listening to a lot of the other remixes that were in the 5 Years box set, the Ziggy remix by Ken Scott, and then Tony Visconti did some remixes, I thought his remix of Lodger was phenomenal. I thought it really brought a lot more clarity to the album. This, on the other hand, this is interesting because it's really taken some liberties. It sounds like a very, very different album, this remix. It's very different from the original. Most of the panning and stuff is the same, but there are some significant EQ changes, and it really has a lot more low-end punch. In some ways, that's good. I mean, overall, like, do I think it sounds better than the original? Yeah, I think it sounds a lot more contemporary, which is what Visconti says in the notes. But I do think it maybe takes away some of the rugged charm of the original album that was very rough around the edges, and that was part of why it was kind of a charming record, because it is early Bowie. It's before he really starts just throwing out the rule book and developing persona after persona and really becoming a sonic innovator. This is well before all that, and it always was just a kind of moody folk rock album. And this kind of takes it out of that context, in my opinion. I really, really like it. Don't get me wrong. I thought it sounded fantastic, and I love how much more low end there is. It was just jarring especially listening to it back to back after the original version and then this new version, it's striking how different it is. It's probably one of the most expansive remixes I've ever heard of any album across any of the things I've talked about on this channel and things I haven't talked about. It was surprising how different it was from the original, but I do like it. Will you like it? I'm not sure. It depends on how close you are to the original mix. The only song I would argue probably doesn't sound as good as the original is Space Oddity, because there's no fade in and some of the panning and effects and stuff, it just sounds very different than the original. Although I will say it does bring out the Mellotron more. Amazing Mellotron by the amazing Rick Wakeman, which I've always loved. It's always been my favorite thing about the track is the Mellotron. But it's very, very, very different. Enough said. Whether you like it or not depends on how close you are to the original version, and do you want to hear this record that is kind of a product of its time be severely modernized? Not to the point where they're running everything through auto-tune and whatnot, but it's interesting. So what are the buying points here? Well, certainly for me, the demos. I guess for people that have heard all this stuff before or heard most of it before, that's not going to be a buying point. But for me, it was very fascinating. Especially the second disc, the Mercury demos. I thought that little, basically a live set performed by him and Hutch was really cool. And it's almost interesting to think what it would have been like had he gone down that road and the two of them had stayed together and been a duo. Would any of that stuff that happened later in his career, even a year later with The Man Who Sold the World, would any of that have happened? Who knows? And then to hear some of these songs that I was not familiar with, like Ching-a-Ling, London by Ta-Ta. I liked Reverend Raymond Brown a lot. I like In the Heat of the Morning a lot. I especially enjoyed the BBC version of that. I thought it sounded very full and interesting, and I like the electric guitar licks in it. Overall, the price was very fair, $70 for 5 CDs and a very pretty, nice, well-organized book. It's hard to complain about that. I suppose it could have been a few bucks cheaper, but I'm not upset with the price that I paid for it. I think it's well packaged, it's well arranged. I like the book as well. I like that it provides a lot of context and the memorabilia, some of the correspondence between him and his manager, as well as record labels. That's fascinating stuff to look at. It really turns it into more of a historical document as opposed to just including photos. So overall, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, and the only reason it loses a star is because it's just not my favorite period in Bowie's history. But, as I said, I appreciate this period in his development a lot more now that I've had the chance to take sort of a deep dive into it. Overall, 4 out of 5. Really interesting. If you like early Bowie, then I don't see any reason not to buy it for what I consider a very fair price, unless you have basically everything in it. The Space Oddity remix album is really cool, and I like that it's presented alongside the original version. They didn't pull a George Lucas here and try to replace it with this new, very different mix. It's just an alternate way to hear the album, but the original is still included and sounds fine. 4 out of 5. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you have this set? What do you think about it? What do you think about Bowie's early period in general? Should I check out the Duran David Bowie album and some of the other various singles from that period? Let me know what you think in the comments. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.